Good afternoon. My name is Rebekkah Hudson. This is an interview about Beli Farms for the Gainesville Business History Oral History Project run by the Inquire Capitalism program of the History Department at the University of Florida. Understand that for us and for the public, the information you are providing is a gift as it is an incredible historical resource and we dearly appreciate it. This interview will be available as part of UF Oral History Collections and through UF Digital History Collections and YouTube. Please introduce yourself. What is your full name and can you please spell it?
Hi, my name is Emil Belibasis. That's Emil, E-M-I-L, last name, B-E-L-I-B-A-S-I-S.
Thank you. To begin, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself? You're from Honduras, is that correct?
That is correct.
What year were you born?
A long time ago, 1954. Yeah, November 3rd, 1954. Actually, it might have been November 4th. That's another story.
Oh no. You don't really know?
Well, I have an idea. I was staying with my aunt one time. We were living in New York. My dad took me back to Honduras, so he couldn't take care of me, so I went to my uncle's. And so my aunt said, you know, you weren't born in November 3rd because November 4th is the Day of the Dead.
Oh.
So you were born on the Day of the Dead. Really? So I asked my mom, is that true? She said no, she denied it. So there was no reason for my aunt to lie. So I guess I was born on the 4th with my mom, you know, she changed it. But I'm happy with November 3rd.
What was it like growing up in Honduras?
Growing up in Honduras? It was nice growing up in Honduras. My dad was an entrepreneur, so was my mom. Both were entrepreneurs. My dad had a restaurant, cafe, and my mom helped him out and helped out at the house. And we lived what would be in Honduras an upper middle class upbringing. But we were always grounded, and I had great friends in my neighborhood. We had at some point had a country house that we would go on the weekends, and we loved going there. That's the village where my mom was born, called Valley of the Angels, Valle de Angeles. And so, yeah, relatives, lots of friends. So yeah, but it was kind of short-lived.
Right, you said you spent some of your youth in the United States, is that correct?
Yeah, at the age of 9, we moved. We actually went through a period from the age of 9 till the age of like 18 that we were going back and forth every year or two. Okay, just constantly moving. And so I lived in Honduras and I lived in New York, lived in Texas for a few months. So when I would go to Honduras, I would have lost a little bit of my Spanish, you know, I was a little rusty and you could tell a little accent and kids would joke about it, you know. Oh, he went to the US and now he's a gringo, you know. Or when I was in New York and I had been living in Honduras, I would lose some of my English, speaking English correctly. So kids would joke about it as well. So it took a long time until I came to college here when I kind of established my linguistic skills.
That's really interesting. Did you learn English before coming to America?
No, I remember vividly sitting in my dad's bedroom bed and him hammering us with, the alphabet, the numbers, just trying to get us to learn. So we learned only just a few things. I went to a public school in New York, P.S. 98, PS 98 in Inwood, Manhattan. And I remember I went into 4th grade and a teacher would take me out for maybe like one period, just work on my English, and then they would throw me back into class, all English. But my luck had it that as soon as I moved, as the whole family moved to New York, I made friends instantly. And that's what made me learn English better and without an accent, because I had lots of friends. So I quickly was able to learn English. But yeah, they would yank me out of class and work on me and throw me back in. That was in 4th grade. And maybe 5th grade. When I ended 4th grade and I started 5th grade. Then I went back to Honduras. Yeah.
So language, I know you're taking Greek courses right now. Like, how important is language to you and how you live your life?
Language in general or Greek?
Language in general, but also
Well, no,
Greek.
I like languages, but I was just lucky that I was able to learn English at a young age. But Greek is something that I always wanted to learn, but my dad didn't find it important, so he never taught us Greek. And if he had, we would have forgotten it because there was nothing around us, except maybe in New York. Some friends were Greek, but they spoke English. They didn't speak Greek.
Right.
So it would have been kind of futile to do that. And I picked up phrases and words and stuff like that throughout my youth. And I remember almost everything. Whatever I learned then, I still remember. Yeah. I remember one time we were in Montreal. We were living in New York. My dad took us to Montreal, and we went to a Greek restaurant. So my dad said to my brother and I, hey, go ask him for a teaspoon. So we went over there and said, enakutalaki, so we never forgot. And then he says, okay, go back and tell him I want a glass of water. Enapotiri nero. And so that's how it was. So I always wanted to learn Greek, and gone through many different trials. I would buy books, would buy videos, but life gets in the way of this. So about a year ago, I said, you know what? The university has these classes. I checked in. I said, I could go to class for free. I said, I'm going.
You take the classes for free?
Yeah,
Oh.
it's for free. For Florida, two requirements. Be a Florida resident and age 60 plus.
Wow.
With those two things, you can take classes here for free as long as there's room. Okay, so I don't get the approval from the registrar until the week of the classes, because they want to make sure that paying customers, go first.
Right.
Okay, but that's a great thing, because if they have the room, it doesn't cost the university anymore.
Right.
So I think I only paid like a finance fee or something like that, $3.
Wow.
So I love it. Huh?
So that's incredible. I did not know we had that.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know it, but I don't know. Years ago, I took a course in Santa Fe about retirement financing, and I said, I wonder if the University of Florida has something similar.
Right.
And that's how I learned about this. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That's
Yeah, it
so
is.
unique too.
And I just got off the phone before I came up here. There's a professor in the College of Medicine who he and his wife want to sharpen their Greek skills too. We had a party and I told them that I was, a student. And so they contacted me. They want to find out how to do it.
So you're really networking you're like an ambassador. That's really cool.
I was like a UF ambassador at the College of Agriculture a couple of summers in Washington lobbying Congress many, many years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, I loved it. I loved it, yeah. There were a group of farmers, most everybody. We were like 7, 8 individuals that were picked out. And for 2 years in a row, we went up to Washington to lobby Congress on behalf of the College of Agriculture.
Wow.
Yeah, I met Senator then, former Governor Bob Graham.
Wow.
He was a senator then. You know, when we just had the State of the Union address, and the president will, you know, refer to some guests that he has up on the balcony. Well, I went to the balcony there when I went to visit Capitol Hill, and while I was there, I saw the congressmen and women vote. Okay, and they just waltzed in, mingled, chit-chatted, and all of a sudden they disappear, you know, and they had voted, you know.
Wow.
And I just sat there and watched the whole thing, you know. This was before there was an incident where a police officer got killed in Washington, and ever since then, the security got really tight. But before that, you could go into congressmen, senators, you know, the Senate building is separate. So I went to all those places. Under the street, there's tunnels with little trains. You know, they're more like carts, but on tracks,
Right.
that you can go back and forth or you can walk. And I had a blast. I would meet people that I had seen on TV. In fact, on this little train, you know, with carts, we were going to sit, and where our group sat, there was no room, and there was the last cart, say, there was room. There was only one guy. He happened to be a congressman. And I sat there, and they told me, get out of there, you know. There was a sign that said, only for, you know, senators, congressmen. Oh, I said, excuse me. He said, nah, forget it. He said, stay. Yeah, yeah. And I still remember the congressman. So yeah, I had a blast.
Wow.
I had a blast.
So that's an opportunity you got from being a student at UF?
No, because I had been, because I was a farmer. And I guess it was linked. I can't say for sure that everybody was an alumni, but because we were farmers, that was the main reason. And so the association with the College of Agriculture.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you end up coming to Gainesville for being a student at UF. Can you talk us a little bit about that journey, how you got back from Honduras to here?
Okay. So first of all, when I finished high school, I wanted to stay in New York, and you know, but my mom didn't like the idea of staying up there, so we went back to Honduras, and I applied for to enter an ag school there. And I was fortunate. I was given a scholarship. Practically every student that enrolled had to have a scholarship. Okay, it would be kind of unusual or under special circumstances that you would enroll and not have a scholarship. So anyhow, so I did 3 years of agriculture. Back then, the school, and I say the school because it was a 3-year school. It was not a 4-year college. So once I graduated, I wanted to continue my studies, but I had to find me a scholarship. And so I worked for a couple of years with the Ministry of Agriculture in a project that I knew had scholarships available at some point. Right. So that's how I ended up coming here. And by the way, it was an AID, USAID funded program that got me the scholarship for which I studied here. So I came up here to finish my BS, but because of my grades, I finished in like 3 quarters. It was a quarter system instead of a full year. Right. So I started taking master's courses with the same scholarship. I didn't graduate. I just continued taking classes. And so by the time I graduated, I had a good chunk of my master's degree courses in agricultural economics. Not all, but a good chunk. So that's how I ended up coming up here.
What was that decision for you to go into agriculture when you were in college as opposed to any other discipline?
To go into agriculture?
Yeah, like when you were studying agriculture.
The decision to study agriculture, it was one of the few options left for me when I finished high school that I could get a scholarship. So that was a big reason. I liked agriculture, but I also liked archaeology and history. But then I said, history, you know what? Be a professor? I don't want to be a professor. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be more into the business side. Okay, so that's how I started agriculture in Honduras. When I came up here and did co-major, my BS degree is in vegetable crop production, believe it or not, and I co-majored in agricultural economics, food and resource economics. Right. So after that, for my master's, I decided to continue with economics, food and resource economics, because I felt like I want to have a broader understanding of agriculture.
Right.
So with economics, I would have, it was not as technical. Right. Okay. Now, I didn't want to get involved in like entomology, plant pathology, soil science, or animal husbandry. I want to have a more broader understanding. So economics, ag economics, gave me that. I was a very engaged Honduran. At the time, I wanted to go back to Honduras and help Honduras develop. And I did go back, but I lost that. I had several things happen where I lost that interest. And I was married. My wife was American, and she didn't like it down there. And so that's how I came up here. I came back.
Your master's thesis, we've talked about this a little bit before. Can you share a little bit about that and how it's affected your business currently?
My business what?
How it's affected your business, or you as a farmer, your master's degree and what you were really learning.
My thesis, the thesis that I wrote, I wanted to do something that would have an impact, that potentially could have an impact. Right. And before I worked on my thesis, I had worked in this project in Honduras called the Cucumber Vegetable Export Project, funded by USAID, which was during the Reagan era, where there was this program called the Caribbean Basin Initiative to help these poor countries develop so that you don't get illegals coming into the U.S., okay? You have more stability in the area. That was Reagan's approach. And so I I happened to be there at that time when this all was happening. And so I got involved in this project, an export project, and I started with this project from doing trials. You know, when I say trials, these are experimental trials of different vegetables in a couple of different areas of Honduras. And tried all kinds of stuff, from okra to lima beans. We had tomatoes, cucumbers, different things. And we ended up just selecting cucumbers because tomatoes, which is the big item for vegetables, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, this agency there called APHIS, Animal Plant Health Inspection Service. And they're the ones that rule on what things can be imported into the U.S. and how, what methodology. So it turns out that Honduras, there was what's called a Mediterranean fruit fly, which devastates citrus and mangoes, stuff like that, devastating. So those items were no longer possible to export from Honduras. And unfortunately, tomatoes got lumped in with those other items, even though there's not that much, I believe, record of this fly attacking the tomato fruit. But, you know, to be cautious, APHIS decided to lump tomatoes. So tomatoes is what we wanted to do, but we ended up doing cucumbers. And so because we were involved with cucumber production for export to the US, my thesis was in that area. And I basically wrote a thesis trying to evaluate the feasibility of Honduran cucumber expansion in the U.S. market, whether it was profitable or not. And the results of my work said that yes, that it was feasible to expand significantly, because the only other major winter supplier to the U.S. other than Florida was Mexico. Okay, so that's how I got involved. That's how I picked that subject. And how it has affected my business, I think mostly the thesis, I don't think has impacted the way I run the business, other than the fact that my background in economics helped me understand economic factors. I had a great time in my mind trying to build the business and remembering some of the economic principles, like the long run average cost curve, just different things that help me understand the environment, the economic environment better than most people that I was surrounded by. The fact that I had training in agriculture also made it easier for me to digest information that was relevant to the business, whereas other people might question things, says, well, I'm not sure about that, I could understand things easier and make decisions on the farm. And I think I told you one case was a situation where the crops were, the tomato crops in my area were deteriorating, and a lot of the growers felt, because this was happening in other fields of agriculture, like the nursery industry was impacted. There was a fungicide called benlate produced by DuPont that had trace amounts of, I think it was atrazine, which is a herbicide component, a compound that somebody by mistake put the fungicide in a bin that had residue, and so it started impacting crops when they sprayed this. And so the growers thought that the tomatoes were being impacted by that. So a lot of growers sued DuPont and got a bunch of money. And a lot of people closed shop because they thought that their place was contaminated, that they wouldn't continue growing. But what would happen is that there would be new growers that started growing in new greenhouses that had the same problem with never applying the product, so something was not right. And so eventually the university, it was California University that actually found out. The University of Florida had a difficulty trying to figure out what was going on, and the problem was that it was a virus transmitted by whiteflies, but when they examined the tomato tissue, here, I believe, they couldn't find the virus. And they had to transfer it, I think, this is my recollection, to tobacco tissue in order to observe the virus, which, you know, there's all kinds of methodologies. So they found out that it was a virus, and I had some old greenhouses that were not screened for whiteflies, and I had some new greenhouses that were screened for whiteflies, and I noticed that the greenhouses that did not have screening had a lot more of this problem than the ones that had screening. So when the university came out with that information that it was caused by whitefly, not DuPont, the DuPont product, I got it. I quickly started screening, and I just kept on growing, expanding. Other growers kept on believing that it was, this DuPont problem. They kept on going after DuPont, and they lost their businesses eventually. And I just continued growing. So that's just like one example. So yeah, throughout the years, there were a number of things that could have closed my business, and either by luck or just because of my background in agriculture, I think that those things made a difference for me to understand things a little bit better, to try to find out more about stuff, to seek out the truth, you know. So yeah. So yeah, that I definitely felt that my studies here at UF impacted what I did there, and at the same time, the University of Florida, the College of Agriculture, IFAS, because they have research, extension facilities in the area. I was very close. I have been very close to that center since I started, and so all of that helped me. There were a number of situations where, had I not had that, the business could have closed.
Right.
But because I had that relationship, I was able to solve the problems. And that's, some people would say that, oh, I'm successful. And I would say, you know, I feel like I'm more of survivor. Okay, that I've been able to solve the problem somehow. So my persistence is what caused me to continue the business. So I sometimes feel uncomfortable saying successful, you know, but the fact that I had these relationships, this background, all of that worked in my favor because what I've been doing all these years, 35 odd years growing tomatoes in greenhouses in North Florida, you're not going to find that many greenhouses doing that here. In just the past few years is when mostly Canadian entrepreneurs, greenhouse growers from Canada that have facilities in Mexico started placing greenhouse facilities, starting greenhouse facilities in the Southeast. Before that, before the last, say, 5-7 years, there was nothing for tomatoes, okay? It was like a no-no, too hard, too difficult. And I still don't know about those facilities, how well they are doing, okay? I don't know how well, but it is, what I'm trying to say, that this is a challenging area for growing those vegetables, even though people associate Florida with tomatoes, but greenhouse tomatoes in North Florida is not so easy. And that's because the market for the tomatoes is, a good chunk of the market is through the winter. And during the winter, well, there's not a lot of light here.
Right.
Okay? So, and it's cold relative to central South Florida. So the yields are lower. And also, as compared to big competition in Canada, California, Arizona, during the summer, those areas are in full production. That's when they are able to make their money, is by the heavy yields in the summer. There's nothing going on over here.
Right.
It's too hot.
Interesting.
Yeah, hot and humid. It's the humidity, not the heat. Because you could grow in New Mexico, very hot and dry.
Right.
So the tomato plant, the physiology of the tomato plant is such that it cannot stay cool during the summer here because the humidity is high and the plant just heats up. Can't remove that heat well, so it starts deteriorating.
Interesting.
Yeah, so yes, growing tomatoes in North Florida and in all of Florida is a challenge. The small tomatoes, they could do better. I don't understand, other than the fact that they're small, that makes it easier, okay? But big tomatoes, I don't know that there's anybody that is growing big tomatoes in July, August, September in Florida, either in the field or in greenhouses.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How different is the climate here versus in somewhere like Honduras?
Well, the Florida climate, of course, the winters here are much cooler than down there.
Right.
But Honduras is, Honduras is, a good chunk of it is mountainous, so that there are areas that are cool, even during the summer. So there are areas in Honduras that the summers are hot and dry. There are areas that are hot and humid, like where the bananas come from. Honduras is, I told you, the stereotypical banana republic, okay? That's where the term was coined, from Honduras, because there were 2 banana companies there. So they pulled the strings, okay? Yeah, they would decide who the president would be,
Wow.
Oh yeah. There's I don't know the details, but I've read and heard that the American embassy was like an extension of the banana companies. They're doing their bidding.
Wow.
Okay. Yes.
Interesting.
Oh yeah. So that's why there's this and not just in Honduras, in a lot of Latin countries where the U.S. Government would go to the assistance of their interests, their companies. There was a mining company where the area where my mother was from. It was called the Rosario Mining Company, something like that. And they extracted silver and gold from the village next to where my mother was from. My mom was married once before she married my dad, and he was from that village. And then they became, they had made money because of this company having this activity. But anyhow, that's how Honduras was known for, because of these United Fruit, and I forget now what were the Standard Fruit companies. They had different names, so that's where that term is coined. But I forget now what line of thinking I was going to explain to you. I lost track.
I wanted to ask, before we move on to specifically your business, talking about education and knowing that you are funded by USAID, how do you feel about what's happened recently with USAID?
Please don't ask me that. I'm outraged. I'm totally outraged. Okay? USAID is one of the gems of American government. You could say that there's waste. Government is not an efficient organization. It's just not, there isn't the kinds of ways that you can control it to become efficient like private enterprise. Private enterprise, they fight, some go out of business, some survive it. With government, that doesn't work that way. You don't want, institutions closing, so government is going to be inefficient. That I think, we can always do better, but the USAID is, it's the good face of America out there. I'll tell you, relating to the project that I was involved in, I remember that as a young man down there, I had some thoughts that were anti-U.S. government because of the background of the banana companies and so forth. So I remember with the USAID, a lot of the money that is used by USAID to fund projects comes from a congressional legislation called, I think, Title IX. And I think it's called Food for Peace, okay? Whereby the U.S. government provides wheat, corn, whatever, to, like Honduras, they'll send the wheat, and the Honduran government will then sell it locally, and that's how it gets the money that is donated from the U.S. Like, so say U.S. donates, $20 million, say, okay? Well, it's not that the U.S. sends a check. No, they sent the wheat, okay? And Honduras sells it, and then that's how they get the money. But it comes with strings attached, okay? If you're going to buy cars, you buy Fords and, Chevys,
Interesting.
You follow me? If you want to hire a consulting firm, you hire from these consulting firms. And it's not all like that. There's special conditions, you follow me? But in general, the U.S. tries to promote its own interest in this. So I would hear people say, and even myself would say, it's not food for peace, it's food for control, okay? But of course, I was a young man, and today I know better. Okay, it's not for control. Honduras doesn't have to take this money. They don't have to take it. So you want this money? These are the conditions. And so that's the way I view it today. But so yeah, I think this is scandalous. It is, somebody was saying that this will become the golden age of America. It's quite the opposite. So I'm furious. I'm furious about that. Excuse me. Yeah. Totally upset about that. And there are things, USAID, like any other institution, that you might say, hey, I don't think we should be spending money on this or on that. But what they did is just, chopping, good and bad. There's no scalpel. There's no scalpel involved, okay? It's just a axe, okay? Just a hack, so it's terrible. What I'm seeing today is just completely out of the norm. So I'm totally opposed to all of that.
Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
It's a great perspective. So your first job was working with the Food and Resources Economics Department here, is that correct?
Yes, when I moved back, yes. I'll tell you, when I moved back, it's not like it was planned, okay? So I moved back because my wife said, she's not going back to Honduras, right? I told you before. And so I had to come up here. So I didn't plan or anything. I just moved back. I was a resident, alien, had a green card since the age of 9, so I could come anytime. So I did. I was unemployed for like 2 months, but it felt like forever, okay, forever. And even though I spoke English, I studied at universities, my telephone speaking skills were terrible, okay? And so I had to get on the phone to call, to introduce myself. And I remember my wife would push me, you gotta do it, it was terrible. So anyhow, I couldn't find a job, and my wife found a job. And we were living in my wife's parents' retirement home in Dunellen, okay, temporarily. And so she got a job down in Miami as a federal government employee at a recruitment center, okay, as a secretary or something like that. So I said, well, better something than nothing. So we go down to Miami, to move there. And I'm not happy. We go there, find an apartment. We're ready to sign a lease. I said, just hold on. I said, before we sign, call your mom, see if she's heard of anything, because I had been calling places, whatever. And so I remember from the apartment itself, we went to see the apartment. I was looking out the window, and there was a Pepsi-Cola, warehouse that I see. I said, gee, I might even be working at a place like that. I just felt so bad, out of place, okay? And so anyhow, we went and called my mother-in-law, and the professor from my department says, Emil, please come, I have a job for you, blah, blah, blah. So we never went back to that apartment. We just took off and came back to Gainesville. So that's how I started working in the food and resource economics. But it was only a position based on funds that were allocated. I forget, I think I told you before, the name of these positions. They're not like a professor's position, okay? These are based on grants. If there's money, you know, the position is there. If there's no money, it disappears. So it was not like a permanent thing, but I loved it, okay? The time that I was there for 2 years. I worked on one study. This is work between the University of Florida, after University, Missouri. It's several professors, but managed by the USDA. We did a study on the competition between Florida and Mexico. So this was in my area, you know. I got to go to Mexico a number of times. I also worked on another project. The USDA has a very important service, which has to do with informing interested parties about the market for fruits and vegetables and a variety of other things, cotton, meats, you name it. But my area is fruits and vegetables. So anyhow, they have and had a system for collecting information on what's going on in the markets, prices, volumes, from where they're coming from, so forth, and distributing that information as reports.
Right.
Like there's going to be, like in New York, there's a Hunts Point. This is a big market in New York City of what's being sold there, and just tons of stuff. And this is daily, okay? So I was involved in a study to evaluate that service, and that was phenomenal, fascinating. And for many years later, I was using the service all the time as a farmer because I want to know how much the tomatoes are selling, okay? So I could talk to Publix and see, what price I could get for my product. So I would use that service. So those 2 years, I had a great time. But institutional settings for me is not what I wanted.
Right.
Institutional, academic, that's not I wanted to be in business. So a gentleman that I had met before came to give a talk in our department, and he offered me a job down in Pompano. And so that's when I left the university. Yeah.
Is that the man who introduced you to hydroponics?
No. Hydroponics, actually, the first time that I knew about hydroponics was in agriculture school in Honduras, in Zamorano. One of the professors had these vats, very primitive form of hydroponics. I still remember the professor. He was from Colombia. And that's the first time that I was exposed to hydroponics, the idea of growing not in soil, but in, hydroponics is water culture.
Right.
Doesn't have to be, just water, but anyhow, yeah, it was there, my first, when my learning of hydroponics was when I was at UF. I was also involved in collecting and creating budgets for different crops. Okay, the Food and Resource Economic would put out an annual report on the cost of production for various crops in Florida, North Florida. So I was involved in some of that. And so I learned about a small group of farmers in North Florida that were growing hydroponic tomatoes. That's the first time that I heard of hydroponic production in the area. But I didn't know anything more. I didn't know about the techniques, how they were doing, none of that. I learned it once I started, growing myself.
Can you share a little bit more about how you began to start growing yourself? Like, what was that? What were your first steps into that?
Yeah, well, the background is before I actually started, I was working in Tallahassee as a healthcare economist, which I was not really that knowledgeable about. I mean, economics is economics, but it was a setting that I was not happy with, so I quit that job, and that was the end of my professional career. Okay, but I had learned that there were the hydroponic growers in North Florida, and that one of those growers was selling his farm. So I went to visit him. After I quit my job, I went to visit him, but I told you he was a Bulgarian immigrant, Bulgarian immigrant. But he wanted too much for what, and I didn't have the money. He wanted like $100,000 for the whole thing. Not a lot of land, not a lot of greenhouses, and this was in 1989. That's a lot of money in 1989. So I kept on looking, and I would go around with the university. They would go visit farmers like once every 2 weeks, something like that, see how they were doing. And so I would learn about what they were doing, how they were growing, what problems they had. And while I was doing that, I heard about a guy that was selling a greenhouse in Lake Butler. And it was a truck driver that wanted to get into it, put up 2 greenhouses, home-built greenhouses, and he put a family on the location there to take care of them so he could continue driving his truck, and that didn't pan out. So he did everything on credit cards, and now he had bills to pay, so he just shut everything down and sold one greenhouse to a neighbor, and then I showed up and bought the other one. And at the same time, he had a little mobile home that he built that I bought from him as well, which was located like 10 feet from the greenhouse. So now I had a home and I had a business. This is in March of 1989. And I think I told you that was a memorable year. That's the year I quit my profession. I started a business. I got divorced, and my daddy passed away, all in that one year. So that's how I started in Lake Butler with just a single greenhouse, 35 feet wide by 132 feet long. And after about a year and a half in Lake Butler, I bought some land where I have the farm now in Wellborn, and yanked out that little greenhouse and the mobile home. And from that one greenhouse, I built 3 greenhouses, which was now about 10,000 square feet. Wow. The greenhouse that I had was about 3,000, 3,500 square feet, something like that. So now I had 10,000 square feet, which is almost a quarter of an acre. Okay. And that's how I started in Wellborn. So what happened is when I bought the greenhouse, the gentleman was a member of a co-op that was in charge of packing and marketing the tomatoes. He just grew, okay? He just grew the tomatoes, and he'd take them over there. They would process them, and they would sell them, and then he would get a check for whatever he brought in. So I became a member of that co-op. I inherited that with the purchase of the greenhouse. And that's how I started. And I stayed with that co-op for 5 years. But I was unhappy the whole time. I wasn't making much money. There was too many shenanigans going on. Most of the people didn't have a background in agriculture, were not even farmers.
Interesting.
Yeah, most of the folks that were growing hydroponic tomatoes in our area that were part of the co-op were not farmers. They were the housewives of an electrician, a plumber, a truck driver. There was something for the wife to do or for him to do, like on the side. They were not farmers. There were a few that were farmers, just a few that were doing this in addition to what they were doing. And maybe they would grow hay, or had cattle, or had one had a seed production business. So there were a small number, but the majority had no background in agriculture in any ways. So they were not very good at it.
Right.
And in fact, because of that, there was a general belief in North Florida that hydroponic tomatoes were terrible, that they had no flavor.
Oh, wow.
You know, like tasted like water, you know. And that's because for years, the stuff that was coming out of those greenhouses was not that good. They would go soft, they didn't taste well, so they had a bad reputation. And so through the University of Florida, learning about fertilization, we started doing a better job. Then we got new varieties that the tomatoes stayed firmer, much longer. There were a number of improvements, and things got better. But I used to struggle competing with field tomatoes, okay? But the only thing is that the greenhouse tomatoes look better. Field tomatoes look a little irregular in shape, and greenhouse tomatoes had a more uniform shape, more rounded. They look prettier, okay? So that was the advantage. So eventually you had that, you had the taste, you had the firmness. Things started improving quite a bit. So for a short period of time, we were doing great, because in March, April, May, when we would have very good production, the prices were very good. But then Canada started expanding big time, shipping to the US, and that spike in price and volume, okay, it's price and volume in March, April, May, fizzled. Now the price was much lower, so it was more difficult to make the money. So it became a challenge for us. So I started going to Canada to look at the industry up there, learning stuff. I brought down hot water heating, rail pipe heating, which was standard up there, but non-existent down here. And in one of my trips, at the time, the main product was a beefsteak tomato, and that's what we were all doing. But then a new product came to be, and I told you about that. This is the tomato on the vine. TOV is the term that's used. And that was a new product. Okay, it didn't exist before. So I started experimenting, putting in a row here and there of this tomato to understand it. And I was selling, at this point, I was selling to Publix now. And I said, hey, would you be interested in these tomatoes? If I grew them, would you buy them? They said yes. And so by the time I had tomatoes to offer them, they were already buying those tomatoes from Holland. It would be shipped by air from Holland. Very expensive.
Right.
Okay? So, but that for me was an opportunity because expensive tomatoes for me is good. You follow me? I'm local. Yeah. I don't have to pay for that air freight. Okay? So I started growing them, and a section, okay? So in my trip to Canada, I realized that the beefsteak tomatoes that I had been growing for years, I would never compete because their packing facilities were so advanced, right. and us being so small, we had just meager facilities. It's not like tomato grow in South Florida. They have 300, 1,000 acres of tomatoes that they need to process. So they have packing facilities for that. But if you have 1/10 of an acre, you have a table, to sort them. Okay. So when I went up there, I realized that I was not going to compete. That the TOVs, I had a disadvantage in production, but I was about the same in packing with them. Okay, they didn't have much of an advantage at the beginning, right. Because later on they automated that aspect, the packing aspect, more and more and more, using robotics a lot more later on. But initially it was almost the same process. You harvest the tomatoes in the box that is going to be shipped. Okay, you don't pick the tomatoes in like a bin and then take them from there and put them into something else. Right. You put them in the same container that it's going to sell. And so the process was similar. So I said, I have a disadvantage in production, but I'm equal in the packing, and then transportation I have an advantage. So maybe I can continue or even expand if I grow TOVs, and that's what I did. And I completely changed over to TOVs, and I did that until the very end with TOVs. The freshness of the stems were fresher than most everything that Publix could get their hands on, right. Because they were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days old or more by the right. time they got here. So I had this advantage. And that was my belief, that they were fresher and they would hold up a little better. So that's how I expanded and expanded and expanded with Publix. I tried Walmart for I think it was just one season. It didn't go well. Walmart at the time would advertise about selling American. This is maybe before your time, okay? Yeah, this is what they would advertise. They like to sell American stuff. Of course, at some point, they did a flip on that, and it's just buying Chinese, okay? Right. Almost everything came from China. So Walmart was very difficult, okay? And so it didn't last. But I also sold to Winn-Dixie, which was the other major retailer in the area here. And I did well with them, but it was short-lived also. They went bankrupt one time. Fortunately, I didn't lose any money. And they were disorganized. Okay, it was not a well-run organization. Publix, very sharp, everything.
Right.
It's above board. There was no, like when I dealt with the buyer, that was one comforting thing, is that when I talked to the buyer, if another grower from Canada that maybe had 1,000 times more product than I did, that guy could not take the Publix buyer and take him out golfing or whatever, or send them gifts or whatever. None of that. It's a policy that Publix has, so that the buyer is never persuaded by gifts of any kind to change what they do, the prices or the quantities or all of that. So I didn't have to worry about trying to get in the good graces.
Right.
Okay, you follow me? And generally speaking, they were pretty good about that. So, and Publix was, for the most part, pretty good in terms of the pricing. They were relatively honest, okay? If you're buying, you want stuff cheap. If you're selling, you want to sell high. That's the way nature is, business like that. But let me just say that in the 23 years that I sold to Publix, I think I only once heard them tell me that either they were happy that they had me as a vendor or anything like that. They would never say, "Oh, thank you so much," nothing. It was just a transaction. How many you got? The price is this. There's no embellishing, no thank yous, no nothing. So it was pretty, they don't want to, if they say, "Oh, your product is great," or whatever, that can influence pricing. You follow me? So they try not to say anything, okay? It's just what you got and what price and when, so yeah. But as I told you before, that ended after 23 years. In the last 2 years, it became very difficult, and I decided to call it quits.
Right.
And another thing is that for the bulk of the period, except for the few times that I told you, and some other, I sold product in New York. I ventured out to see, how I could do, but always, like, shipping to New York was always difficult. Getting a truck to go to New York, okay, with just, a truck may hold 40 pallets, and I may be sending one pallet. So to try to get somebody to stop by the farm to pick up that one pallet to take to New York, and it was always very difficult. I did some of that, particularly with cucumbers. I started selling cucumbers in substantial amounts at some point. The Persian cucumbers, okay? Yeah, I sold those in Detroit. I used to sell for a few years, a lot, for me, okay? It may not be much for others, but for me, meaning that I might sell 10 pallets in 1 week, okay? And a pallet may have 80, 100 cases, okay? So that was a lot. But the money was terrible, okay? The money was terrible. So eventually I quit. I quit shipping to Detroit.
That's really interesting. So the story of how you got involved with Publix supermarkets is very interesting. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, as I told you, when I started, I was a member of this co-op, and the co-op was in charge of packing and marketing. So I didn't market. I only had some coals that I could sell, and I would go to the farmer's market here in Gainesville, little things like that I would share. It was, small amounts. But what happened with Publix is that when I left the co-op, I had to find a place to sell my product. So I connected with a wholesaler, okay? But at the same time, I approached a Publix store, just a single store in Lake City. I approached the produce manager, and I said, hey, I showed him my tomatoes. Look, if I offer them to you, would you buy them? He said, yeah, sure. And I learned that they were not supposed to be buying. There were only a few items that they could buy at the store, but tomatoes was not one of them. But they were so nice that this guy told me yes. So I started on my own, wholesaling to like a broker, and selling to that Publix store. And then I went to talk to the Publix in the next town, which is Live Oak, and I started selling to them. And then I went to High Springs. There was a Winn-Dixie there. And so I started selling to individual supermarkets. I would sell 5 boxes here, 10 boxes there, 20 boxes over there. I'd go around with my little pickup truck. And so at some point, I was selling to most of the public supermarkets in Gainesville.
Right.
Okay? Most of them, not all of them. And I added some more greenhouses. So when I added the extra greenhouses, said, well, I'm going to go down to Ocala. Now I had, when I left the co-op, I went to Publix because Publix was buying the co-op tomatoes, which they branded them as hydroponic tomatoes, okay? They would put them in a tray as hydroponic tomatoes. So when I went to talk to the person in charge over there, he says, I'm sorry, but I'm happy where I'm getting them, which was the co-op that I left. Okay, I'm happy. But then the co-op, after 5 years, had folded. So when it folded, I was not going to go to the warehouse to talk to them. I wanted to expand what I was already doing because I felt like I had a better chance of getting more money for my tomatoes if I talked to a produce manager than talk to the Publix buyer, okay? Right. Publix buyer, you know, this is what he does, okay? So I thought I could get more money for my product by doing it that way. So I go to Ocala, you know, I'm thinking I'm gonna conquer Ocala Publix, okay? And the first place I go to is the produce manager is a Hispanic guy like me, okay? And you'd think there'd be some camaraderie or something. No, not at all. He said, hey, what you're doing is wrong. And you and the other Publix produce managers could get in trouble for doing that. So he scared the heck out of me. So I think the next week I was at the warehouse, Publix in Jacksonville, where the product comes from. That's the distribution center for North Florida. So I went to talk to the same individual that I had spoken to 5 years earlier. But then there was no co-op, and they didn't have those hydroponic tomatoes, and they said yes. And that's how I was able to sell to Publix supermarkets. That that they lost a source, and I showed up. They had nobody else to get hydroponic tomatoes. And that's how it started, and it just kept on growing and growing and growing. I would take advantage because Publix paid whatever product was accepted at the warehouse. It was like money in the bank. You for sure that you're going to get a check. There's no question that they're going to say, oh, but you know, no. It would get paid. So it was a reliable customer. Very reliable customer, and one of the best supermarket chains in the country, if not the best.
Right.
So I locked in. I locked out, whatever, you know, I locked out. And so I said, I'm going to run this baby for as long as I can. So the diversification of a portfolio that you study in finance, I realized that even though that is the normal thing to do, to diversify, have a number of customers, there weren't many choices. There weren't many good choices. I had Walmart, terrible. Winn-Dixie, disorganized, okay? And my other choices was to ship elsewhere, so there weren't that many choices. Publix was really the only good choice. Right. So I said, you know, even though it's risky, I'm going to put all my eggs in this basket and just run it for as long as I can. And that's what I did. And I ran it for 23 years until there was a change in management and they didn't think I was necessary or whatever, you know, so they started giving me a hard time. So I said, that's it. Yeah, so that's how that happened.
So you are semi-retired right now, correct?
Yeah, I'm retired, but I still have the farm, the whole, you know, I have 5 acres of structures, okay, of building, greenhouses, okay, but I only grow in maybe 2/10 of an acre. That's all that I grow. Everything is just pulling apart, you know. So I'm trying to sell the farm, but haven't been successful.
Interesting.
So while I'm there, you know, I still have to pay insurance for the whole farm, pay taxes for the whole farm, like electricity. I have many power poles, services, and sometimes I need service from this pole and from this pole. So I shut down like half of the service poles that I know that I don't need, but the other I still do. So even though I don't use that much electricity, I still have to pay for like, you know, 5 services. And instead of being a bill of $50, $80, it's more like $200, $300. Wow. Okay? So I have overhead, but don't have the production. You follow me?
Right.
I have, you know, the insurance overhead, tax overhead, and many other things. So I figured that I might as well grow something while I'm there. I'm not going to just go watch TV and enjoy myself. Enjoy myself meaning I don't have the pressure that I had before, that I had tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and, you know, maybe $500,000 in risk, okay? Now I only have a few $100s in risk, okay? You follow me?
Yeah.
So I don't worry about the finances. I just worry about little things, you know?
Did the change in management at Publix and you no longer selling with them, was that what made you retire, or was it something you were planning on already?
Well, you know, I only surmise, okay? This is what I think. The gentleman that was in charge of all perishable items at Publix in Lakeland, he was like from the old guard.
Right.
And his view was always to try to work with farmers, okay? Work with farmers, create relationships. And so that I went in to Publix with under his leadership, guidance, management skills, or whatever. But there was another gentleman who I had a brush-in that was not positive, that later took that position. And I believe that that tainted his view of my farm. And what happened was the following, is that I get a call from the buyer, and he says, Emil, the boss says that he saw your tomatoes at a Publix supermarket, I don't know, in Tallahassee, okay? One supermarket, and they look like crap. And he said they look like Mexican tomatoes. That's derogatory, because Mexican tomatoes actually are pretty good, okay? They're actually superior to Florida tomatoes because they're vine ripe, and Florida has taken a long time to develop vine ripes, but they still, the bulk of it is mature green tomatoes. They pick them green, whereas in Mexico, it has some color. So they're superior tomatoes. But anyhow, I don't know what this guy knows or doesn't know, but he said, no, they look like Mexican tomatoes. And what happened is that these are tomatoes on the vine with the stems, and the stems, the tomatoes were not selling. The stems were drying, and once they're dry, you know, people grab and they poke each other, and so what the stores normally do, they come in the morning and they're constantly working the vegetables to remove bad stuff and throw it away, so it always looks pretty, as pretty as they can make it look. You follow me?
Yeah.
Somehow somebody was not on top of it, and I surmise that that particular situation, the price for hydroponic tomatoes on the vine, like mine, and from many other suppliers, was very high, like say $3 a pound. And they had field tomatoes on sale, I don't remember right now, but more like 99 cents. So there's a $2 gap. So people, when they see 99 cents, they buy the 99 cents tomatoes, and the $3 tomatoes sit and go bad. And that's what was going on with my tomatoes. They were going bad because they were sitting there because there was a price differential. So he tells the buyer, and the buyer tells me. And then Publix, out of whim, that gentleman, he was not in charge at that point. He was still under the head of perishables, okay? He developed a quality control just for me. Not for everybody that grew tomatoes on the vine. They wanted the stem thickness to be no less than X number of millimeters, okay? Just for me, because of that incident. So I had to have a calipers when we packed to measure the thickness of the stem, and if it was too thin, we had to reject it. And we probably would lose 10, 15% of the harvest that we could not sell to Publix, and I would have to sell elsewhere because of that. And they kept me with that requirement for the whole season. Then the next season, they forgot all about it, okay? And the thing is that it was actually like illegal because there are rules in the buying and selling of stuff. The USDA has standards. It's called standards for grades. It determines what is a number 1 tomato, a number 2 tomato, Okay, there's categories, and they describe in detail what the product has to look like. But for tomatoes on the vine, there was none. There was no rule.
Interesting.
Okay, at the time. Today, I think there is. But back then, there was no rule. It didn't say how big or how small the tomatoes had to be, none of it. So this was just Publix, okay? So I could say, hey, I'm gonna call USDA, but how was it gonna help me if they're my sole customer? Do you follow me?
Yeah.
It would not help me to bring a third party and then the next day say, Emil, we don't want your product anymore. So I had to suck it up, basically. You follow me? But that lasted for that season, and after that, they forgot all about it. They never again mentioned the thickness because it was made up. It was on a whim.
Right.
This guy, he just got upset and decided to do it. This is my interpretation. So the other thing is that Publix, for most of the years that I sold to Publix, they would not buy tomatoes from Mexico, any kind of tomatoes. They would exclude Mexico as a source of tomatoes. They could buy avocados from Mexico, pineapples from Mexico, they could buy cucumbers from Mexico, but not tomatoes. And I can't say what their reason was, but I suspect that it was a form to appease. There's a tomato lobby. Florida farmers, tomato farmers,
Right.
have an organization, and they're very powerful, or they were very powerful. You know, I'm not sure where they're at today, but I was never really connected with them because it's mostly about field tomatoes, not greenhouse tomatoes. So I think because there are labor issues with the biggest item is tomatoes in terms of these vegetables. So I think Publix just wanted to be on their good side and decided not to buy Mexican tomatoes because that organization had on multiple occasions tried to sue Mexican tomatoes, Canadian tomatoes, tried to protect its market.
Right.
So they tried to sue Canadian tomatoes, Mexican tomatoes for dumping. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. Dumping is it's a technical term, basically that they're selling in a market below cost of production. Suppose they sell the tomatoes for 50 cents a pound, but their cost of production is $1 a pound, and they're selling for 50 cents. That's considered dumping. There's nothing wrong with that because when you figure out your cost of production, the cost of production at the end of the season, when everything has been paid for, is only pick, pack, and deliver. Pick, pack, and deliver. You don't have to consider depreciation of your tractors, insurance, and many other things that you have to consider if you want to go into producing something. You put all the costs. But at the end of the season, all you have to know is how much expenses it's going to take to sell that product and whether you can get more for it than those expenses. Do you follow me? So you can easily sell tomatoes before the true cost, because the true cost includes all costs.
Right.
So dumping is kind of, I think that's how it works. Okay. So anyhow, so the Florida growers, it's called the Florida Tomato Committee, they were always wanting to protect themselves from competition from Mexico and then later from Canada. So so that Publix would have them on their good side. I think they would not buy Mexican tomatoes for a long time. But then everybody else, Walmart, Target, you name it, were buying from Mexico. Even the Canadian growers that they were buying product from, they had either their own farms in Mexico or they had agreements with Mexican growers. Okay, so say this one company, Canadian company X, would talk to make an agreement with a company Y in Mexico, and they would put those tomatoes and make them part of this other company. Okay, there's a lot of nuance about that. You can't mislabel your product, so it has to be done properly. You have to have some kind of ownership or something. But anyhow, Publix was the only one that was not in on the cheaper tomatoes, the Mexican tomato, cheaper, okay? And so I think a combination of that going on and the experience that I had with that particular individual that caused them to start putting the screws on me, making it difficult on me, giving me a lower price than the market, where the market was, not wanting to take as much, just making it difficult for me, knowing that they were my sole customer. So that went on for a couple of years. I lost money for the 2 years. So I said, this doesn't make sense. I'm not going to be doing this for the fun of it. And it ain't no fun. Okay, at that time it was not fun. It was just very nerve-wracking having to deal with them because there was a lot of money involved. So that's what happened in the end. And it so happened the year that I quit growing for Publix, the last season that I grew for them, I finished my crop in June, and a few days later, it probably coincidental, I started seeing tomatoes from Mexico in the stores.
Interesting.
Okay, now it's coincidental because at one point, Publix might have bought 2 million cases of the tomatoes that I grew, and the most I ever produced was like 70,000.
Right.
Okay, so 70,000 is 7% of a million. Okay, so it's 3.5% of 2 million, and that's the most. It ran somewhere between 45 and 70 some cases annually. So I was small potatoes, small amount. Right. Didn't amount to much for Publix. But because I was here local, I was an hour away, it was conceivable that on a delivery, I could have tomatoes from the same day. Like I'm packing and loading, and I'm short. Okay, I don't have enough, and I would tell my people, go pick. From yesterday, there's some that ripened. Go pick. I need 30 more cases. You follow me? So there were occasions that I had tomatoes from the same day being delivered. That's impossible with the competition. It would always be like a week old, almost always. Okay, there's no way that it would be like the next day. So that was what I considered my advantage, that I had fresher product.
Right.
So, but this is what happened, and that's business. I did what I said I was going to do, and fortunately I had foresight. I had no debt. I had paid all my loans years earlier, so I wasn't in a situation where, what do? I have all this debt, okay? No, I remember my accountant that does the taxes for us says, "So what's Emil gonna do? You know, nothing. You know, I'm not gonna do anything. You know,
Right.
and I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna be just fine." I didn't have a debt burden to worry about. What happened is that a few years earlier, there was this company that sprung up in Ocala, spearheaded by a Dutchman. In Holland, they're the masters of greenhouse production.
Interesting.
Okay, the Dutch. And so this guy would come on vacation in Florida, and he noticed that there were no greenhouse tomatoes grown in Florida. He didn't know about me, you know. So he put together a company, and they were going to build 30 acres of greenhouses in Ocala by the airport. The city gave them the land by the airport. You don't need to have land by the airport, okay? It's, you know, it's unnecessary. But the city people got bamboozled, okay? They were during this period that they wanted to create jobs and show that they were creating jobs. So the city, the county, and the state, all of them, were willing to do all sorts of things to come out and say that they were creating jobs.
Right.
Okay? So the city of Ocala gave them this land. They started rerouting the sewer lines, all kinds of stuff to have this land available for these greenhouses. Okay? So they gave them the land. They gave them, I think, an agreement to get electricity cheap for I don't know how many years. The county gave them stuff. They went up to the governor. The governor was willing to pitch in another $1 million or whatever, you know, for this greenhouse. And then they were going to say that they were creating jobs, okay? And who do you think was going to pick those tomatoes? The same people that picked the tomatoes in the fields down in Immokalee. And 99.9% of them are not U.S. citizens, okay? You follow me? So they're not creating jobs for U.S. citizens, okay? Or U.S. residents, you know? They're creating jobs for immigrants. And I don't have any problem with that, but my point is that they're trying to look good, and behind it is nothing good. It's just waste, okay? So they're doing all that, and I'm nervous because if that company springs up, Publix is not going to be interested in me anymore. They got a big company right next to me. You know, they don't care about Beli Farms. You know? You follow me?
Yeah.
So and it turns out that two professors, that one of them, the guy that gave me my first job, and another professor who had been the chairman of the horticulture department in IFAS. The two of them were consultants to that company. And so that company would say that the University of Florida says this and that, you know, that yes, we can do it, because they were trying to do all kinds of things. They were going to grow year round. So in order to grow year round, in the summer, when I tell you that you can't grow, they had to put air conditioning. Okay?
Right.
To dry the air and cool the air. You follow me? And they get cheap electricity. But what happens is the market for tomatoes are high during the winter and low during the summer. So they're going to increase their costs when the prices are lower. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
You follow me?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. But this is what they were putting out. Okay? And I actually got a reporter from Ocala wanted input about what other people thought, and they interviewed me, and I told them all of that is wrong. Okay, I remember, and they interviewed other folks saying similar things, that what they're trying to do does not make sense agronomically, economically,
Right.
but they pushed forward. In the end, the company couldn't find people to finance the project. And so there was a due date on to start building something, and that they needed to show the paperwork for financing, and they didn't. And it all fell apart. But in the meantime, I saw all that. I said, oh my God, if they do this, I'm going to have a hard time. So I decided in a short period of time to pay my loans off, or loan, okay? I paid off my loans. I was in the position to do it, because I said, if I don't pay off the loans and then I don't have enough income to pay the mortgage, then the bank can take everything, because the land, you take everything with the land. So I said, no, I can't do that.
Right.
You know, if they want to take a building, yes, but that's not the agreement. They have like a lien on the land. And if you take the land, you pretty much take everything.
Right.
So I said, I can't have that. So I paid off all my loans. And then the thing flopped. And that's how I ended up having no debt. So when Publix came around to give me a hard time, I said, okay, that's it. I didn't want to grow anything else, because I could have tried growing peppers. I could have tried selling tomatoes elsewhere, but none of them, all of them had risk.
Right.
And at my age, and I was the sole manager, I didn't have partners or anything, it was just me.
Right.
I said, you know, you work too hard to risk more money, stuff that you don't know. And I'm no longer, like they say, a spring chicken, okay? I'm not intellectually as sharp, and I can make mistakes more easily. So I said, I just don't want to do that. You know, I want to continue doing stuff, but I have to do other things, and by doing other things, I put myself at much higher risk. Before, I knew what I was doing. Okay, the tomatoes on the vine, this, I sell them to Publix, you know, I got it all, I got the package. Okay, there's variations every year a little bit. But for the bulk, most of it, it's pretty much the same thing. So trying to come up with a new product, new crop, new markets, I said, I don't want to take that risk. And that's what happened. So I just said, I'm closing it. And I continued doing some, you know, I kind of scaled down.
Right.
Okay, instead of growing the 5 acres, I was now growing 2.5 acres, then 1 acre, then half an acre. I scaled down like that. Because there was a supermarket that I sold quite a bit. I forget the name of that supermarket, but it's no longer in business.
With Hale's Farmers Market, are you still a vendor with them?
Yeah, I'm a vendor there.
How did you get involved with them? How did you find out about them?
Okay, so first of all, I think I told you when I started the farm and I was in Lake Butler, my culls, my rejects, or my extra tomatoes, I would go to the farmer's market on 441. Okay, it's on the corner of 441 and 34th. Back then, 1989, 90, 91, something like that. But when I started the farm, I moved the farm to Wellborn. Now it was a good hour's drive, so I quit, okay? But I loved it. I loved going there. I had good friends, and I would chit-chat with my fellow farmers. So professor that was the chairman of my department, who was doing it semi-retired. And even when he was a professor, he always liked to pill around with fruit crops and vegetable crops. So I would meet up with these guys, and I enjoyed it. I didn't make much money, but it was just a morning, Saturday morning.
Right.
I think it was Saturday morning. So I had a good time. So anyhow, I quit for a long time. So once I quit Publix, and for a couple of years, then I wanted to go back to do what I had been doing at the beginning. So I started doing some research, and I said, oh, well, there's a little farmer's market in Alachua, and there's another one over there. But the one I wanted to go to was the Hale Farmers Market, because that individual that I told you that had been the head of my department, the dean, the chairman of the department, not the dean. He had also sold out of the Hale Farmers Market. He had been part of the board of the farmers market there. So I knew that was a very good market, and I wanted to go there. So anyhow, one day I went to the Alachua Farmers Market, and it was like 5 vendors, you know, like a nothing thing, okay? Like a nothing. There was nobody there, a couple of people, customers there. And there was a lady there. I talked to her. Her name is Natalia. And I told her that, you know, I wanted to get into the farmer's market thing. And she says, well, you could take over this one, because I'm not going to be coming here anymore. You know, I'm just going to stay at the Hale Farmers Market. But I said, hey, can you find out for me? I'd like to apply. So she talked to the other. She was in the board, and she talked to the others by phone. And they approved me, like right away.
Wow.
Okay, right away they approved me, which is unusual. But you know, she just talked to them over the phone. They didn't have to have a meeting. They just texted. I think that's what happened. They texted each other, and that's how I started going there. And I have the time of my life there. I love it. You know, the vendors are very nice, great vendors, interesting people. Okay, you'll find the most interesting people, vendors, as well as the customers. Okay, it's always blows me away. One of the vendors there that's married to that young lady, Natalia, she's actually Ukrainian, okay? But she moved to the U.S. when she was little. Her husband was the chairman of the horticulture department, or is, I'm not quite sure, okay? You find people like that. There was a guy selling seafood. The demand for his seafood at that market, I haven't seen him in a while, so I think he quit. But anyhow, it was such that you would walk by to where his spot is, and he would come late. You know, the market opens at 8:30. He would come at 9:30, and there would be a line, and then no vendor. People waiting for him.
Wow.
Okay, so anyhow, I once went to chit chat with him, and he was a graduate of my same department.
Wow.
Okay, he did it on the side, you know. They're just fascinating people.
Right.
So I love it. They have a variety of food to sell. They have a variety of farmers with products, some organic, some conventional. They have people that make, you know, crafts, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So, and it's not huge, but it's not small.
Yeah.
And the setting is great, okay? The only negative thing is the internet the cell service is not very good. So we always have problems with credit card payments. But so anyhow, I love that place. It's like where I wanted to be. And I just do that one market. Most of the vendors that do it for a living, they go to at least 2 markets.
Right.
Okay, and they have some other choices. I also have choices. I have a company that comes to the farm and picks up whatever I don't sell. They just pick it up like on Monday. So I clean up. It's always fresh.
Right.
So no, I have a blast. I have a blast, and my wife helps me when she can. Yeah, it's fun. Fun. The vendors, you know. There's this one guy. His name is Amir. He's from Iran, and so you know, I told him one time, you know, you remind me of a song that I learned. It was a political song when I was going to Washington to lobby Congress on behalf of the College of Agriculture. We went to see a satirical play. There was this group there, I don't know if it still exists, called the Capitol Steps. Okay, these are members, congressional aides and so forth. They come up with this group and they satirize all things politics. Okay, they'll talk about anything that's politics, but in a satirical way. So this time there existed a Russian space station called Mir. So Amir, okay, Mir. So I told them about this song, to steer Amir, you only need a beer. Objects in Mir are closer than they appear. So anyhow, this guy, gentleman, okay, always looking for good stuff, very proper. And after maybe 2 years of being a customer, you know, most of the time I don't ask, what do you do, you know? So this time I said, hey, Amir, what do you do? He says, I do lung transplants. He's a lung transplant doctor. So I said, hey, you know, doing my tomato transplants, you know, it's really complicated. I said, you know. And so I have an environment, very positive. Of course, people from all walks of life, hardly anybody wanting stuff cheaper, you know. Oh, can I, if I buy 2, will you give me, you follow me? Yeah. You don't get that.
Right.
So, and you have a mix of young and old.
Right.
You know, people your age there, elderly with dogs, babies. You know, it's just very, very positive. I think it's perhaps the best farmers market in North Florida. Up in Jacksonville, they have huge farmers markets, but not the quality that this one. So I'm just having a blast. Yeah, I hope to do it for a long time, but I don't know whether I'm going to stick, once I sell the farm, I'm not sure where I'm going to end up.
What do you feel like the future is for small farmers like yourself? Especially, you know, mentioning competing with people from Holland and people from Canada. Like, where do you think that goes?
Well, no, the trend has been there for decades. Small farms are disappearing right and left. So there's less and less and less small farmers. Fortunately, with the greenhouses, I'll just give you an example. There's a gentleman that I know only over the phone. He's become a friend because he contacted me years ago when he wanted to get into the greenhouse business, hydroponic production, greenhouse production. So he called me, somehow he learned about me. And he's in North Carolina, and he decided to buy a greenhouse, a used greenhouse from Holland, glass greenhouse, which are the best, okay, from Holland, used. He was able to bring it over here and build it there for about what it would cost to buy a new one, but not glass. And he's growing organically from the get-go.
Wow.
He's an organic grower, and he's a family farmer. He's got his family and kids, and he has been quite successful. So with that is one of the key things that I learned, and that I would tell people, that greenhouse production allows you, that you don't have to have 1,000 acres
Right.
or 300 acres to make a living.
Right.
If you grow in a greenhouse, because everything is intense. The value of the product that you produce may be 10 times, 20 times, 30 times or more per square foot than field. Do you follow me?
Yeah.
So I made a living out of 5 acres of greenhouses. Now, if you had 5 acres of tomatoes in the field, you're not going to go anywhere.
Right.
Do you follow me? The income that it will produce is negligible. It's minuscule.
Right.
Whereas the income, at least in my case, with those 5 acres, you know, there were years that I had close to $500,000 of net income.
Wow.
Many years that I only had 10,000, and many years that I had 0, okay, negative income, okay?
Right.
But just to give you a broader, you know, the potential. And this is just me probably not working at my 100%, maybe working 70%, you know, because I always felt like I could do better. I could do better. But one of the things that I might have told you before that I wanted to say about this, about doing better, is that, remember when I started, I only grew the tomatoes. I didn't sell the tomatoes. I didn't pack the tomatoes. And I told you about the work that I did in food and resource economics with this Mexican competition. On one of my trips down there, I met an American who was a researcher, a PhD, working for a grower, a Mexican grower. Back then was maybe the largest vegetable exporter
Right.
in Mexico. You know, very rich family. He was working for him. And so when I met him, he told me, hey, what do you do? I said, well, you know, I got 3 greenhouses, you know, about 10,000 square feet. No problem, you know, there's always a beginning, you know. They said, and how do you market them? You know, how do you market your tomatoes? What containers do you use? Oh, I don't. I said, I just take them to a co-op, I said, and they do it. Oh, no, he says. You grow them, you pack them, you ship them, you sell them yourself. That's how you make the money.
Right.
And that's what I ended up doing, okay? Instead of just being a grower, I would be able to get income from the packing, from the selling, and from the delivery. So I was not very good at any one thing, but the fact that I had my hand in the income potential on all of those 4 parts of the you know, the enterprise, that made it more feasible.
Right.
Okay, so that was a key thing. And again, you can do that. If I had been a field grower, Publix would never touch me. Because field growers, they have 2 months of production and it's over. 3 months tomato production and it's over. I had 8 months of presence that I could tell Publix I'm going to have product for 8 months. Ah, okay. Do you follow me?
Yeah.
But if I say, oh, I'm only going to have tomatoes for 2 months, said, oh, okay, let me look elsewhere.
Right.
You follow me?
Right.
Now, there are certain items that can only be harvested for a very short period of time. And so, like, for example, and that's why companies get big, like strawberries here in Florida. It's only a very limited time that they're in production. So Publix doesn't like to, when it's big quantities, it matters, okay? When you have huge quantities, yeah, I'll buy it from you for these 3 months, I'll buy it from him for those 3 months, I'll buy it. But if you just show up with a few cases, they don't want to bother. Right. You follow me? So buyers want to make it easy for themselves, okay? They want to have less people to talk, you know, for the transactions. They don't want to be dealing with 100 people, whereas they could deal with 3, 4, 5, 10 people. You follow me? So that's why the greenhouse aspect is because it's so intense that you, as an individual, have that possibility with a small area to be able to market your own stuff, to be able to generate income that can provide for your family with relatively small, intense, costly, but still small. And that is unique. And that's how I am a living example of how you could do it with a small area and be able to provide for your family. Because other than what I did on the farm, I rarely, you know, when I got started, I did some consulting work. I think I might have told you before. That work with Mexico, I did that twice. Once when I worked at the university and once when I had the farm. So we did 2 studies that I was involved in.
Right.
Okay, so that was early on. But most of the time that I had the farm, it was only the income from the farm. I didn't do any other consulting or any other sorts of sources of income. It all came from the farm. So yeah. So that's one of the great things about greenhouse production that you cannot get like that in field production.
Right. So would you say that the future of preserving like small farms, family farms, would be opting for greenhouses?
Definitely. Yeah. Of course, even in that area, you're going to have the competition, and so smaller farms have a disadvantage. So they kind of work in kind of niche situations better.
Right.
Okay, you find that a supermarket is interested. Like I remember in Canada, almost nobody grew eggplants in greenhouses. But there was one grower that worked up a deal with a chain, and he provided, you know, acres and acres of greenhouses producing eggplant for this one chain.
Right.
Okay, so you always have these things going on. So you have a better chance of surviving with greenhouse production than with field production, I think. So yeah, American agriculture is being concentrated. It's been happening for a long time. When I was in it, it happened from way before. It's been a gradual You know, I don't know if you looked at the statistics, you know, like 50 years ago, there might have been, I don't know, you know, 10 million farms, you know, I don't know, okay? And maybe today there's only, you know, 500,000, I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, it's the decline is significant. Yeah.
Thank you for that perspective. I really enjoyed hearing what you had to provide. And if there's any like last thing you'd want to say, maybe like your proudest accomplishment. I know you said a lot of times it's like surviving instead of success, but if there's any last thing you like really want to share about your experience.
I can't think of, you know, when I start talking, you know, my head just, you know.
Well, that's okay too.
Yeah. It's not for everybody, okay? I happen to have two things in my favor. Well, more than two things. First of all, I told you that both my parents were entrepreneurs. So I got that part, the entrepreneurship from my parents.
Right.
Then I had the background from college that many times you don't need, but you know, little things add up, okay?
Right.
Little things add up.
Right.
And having that background just helped me a little more. Then my wife, she studied accounting, okay? So she kept the books, you know, everything clean, straight, bills paid always on time, very good credit scores. There was a period before I could get loans, because when I started the farm, I went to try to get loan from Farm Credit, but the hydroponic growers in my area had already provided terrible experiences with Farm Credit. They didn't want to mess with hydroponic growers. They told me that the only way that they could lend me, if the money that I would pay them for the loan came from sources other than tomatoes.
Wow.
You know, ridiculous. So it took like 10 years. You know, so I tried with them, no. So that's when I reached out to family to help finance, you know, when I got established in Wellborn. 10 years later, I get a call from Farm Credit. They found my name, Beli Farms, with Dun & Bradstreet, which is a company that's involved in collecting and disseminating information about businesses, okay? My brother-in-law worked for that company. So yeah, they get a report from Dun & Bradstreet. Yeah, Beli Farms over there, they got so many employees, you know, this is their income, and whatever. They called me wanting to lend me money. That's when I started borrowing from Farm Credit. Before that, it was just credit cards.
Wow.
We used credit cards. We would finance, I financed a project. When I say a project, a greenhouse project, like, I don't know, $150,000, all on credit card.
Wow.
And very low interest. You would think, most of us think of, oh, if you borrow from credit cards, you know, high interest. But no, because credit cards would have, you know, 3 months, no interest, you know, and we would pay one and pay another one, you know, then borrow from this. And my wife did all that flawlessly. So we had those things at the farm. I didn't have to worry about screw-ups,
Right.
okay? My wife kept all of that squeaky clean, which is remarkable, really.
Right.
So she still does it, you know. She kind of doesn't want to give up, you know. Our bookkeeper, I started with my bookkeeper when I moved to Wellborn, like 33 years ago. He's been doing our books all these years.
Wow.
He sold the business, the accounting firm, but he told them that he wanted to keep a few accounts. His favorite or his oldest, whatever, we were one of them. He would continue to do our books until this year.
Wow.
He called us and told us he could do it no more. You know, intellectually, he could not, like, you know, put all the numbers together.
Right.
Which was a very, very sad thing.
Yeah.
But we've had the same bookkeeper for all those years. A very nice gentleman. So, anyhow, there you go, another tidbit.
Thank you so much. This has been great. Like 2 hours of just hearing about this. This is, and I don't know if I've like firsthand talked to a farmer, so it's very interesting.
Yeah. You know, that's one thing in the society that we have. We're doing so many things, you know, that you can't really delve into something unless you have some background into it.
Right.
And then you find out there's so much involved in whatever, you know. And that's the way it is across society. I was listening to the news about the Trump tariffs on Canada and Mexico, but this guy from CNN went to Canada to interview people over there, and I see the diversity of people and companies. You know, this guy has a business working on with steel. Okay. They take product, steel from the U.S., ship it over to Canada to mold it, to drill it, to refine it, to finish it, and then ship it back. And, you know, they do, you know, I don't know, $10 million in sales just doing that, you know. And the guy, he's not white. Okay? He looks like an immigrant from, I don't know, Pakistan or whoever. And I'm an immigrant here. Okay? So I see that guy, I see myself.
Right.
Okay? Except I get a lot more money. Okay? And I see the same thing. This so many people and I don't want to say in particular immigrants, but immigrants more than native born that are pushing hard to excel in a new world, in a new society, you follow me? Don't want to make the move to just, you know, hang out.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense for you to give up your land, your country, your family, your friends, to go to another country and just, you know, hang out.
Right.
Doesn't make sense. You go there and you push.
Right.
And that's why immigrants are generally more successful than native born statistically, because you know you don't want to screw up. I had an employee, not an employee. He would come every now and then and give me a hand, and he was illegal, and he was from my home country, Honduras, and I asked him if he could come that weekend. He says, you know, my girlfriend wants to go out. She wants to go here. He's got an American girlfriend. I told him, what the hell's the matter with you? You know, you're not here illegally. You could be deported any day and go back to where the same condition that you were. Bust your butt, I said. Get to work, buddy. Anytime you can be gone, you go back. If you go back, you want to have some money. Okay, I gave it to him. He said, no, you're here for a limited time. Make good use of it. So, anyhow. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome,
This has
Rebekkah.
been wonderful, Emil.
Yeah.
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 Let me.
Fantastic.